Wednesday, March 5th. Public comment. Any members of the public are invited to address the committee regarding any item that is not listed on the agenda. Anybody out there wishing to rush forward, fill out a speaker card, speak to any item? Public comments open. One last time. Seeing nobody, it's closed. Approval of minutes for February 5th, 2014.
Second.
We have a motion by very quick Kevin and a second by even quicker Janet. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do we do the election now, or do we want to wait till David gets here? We'll open up nominations. Let's do it now. For chair, for...
I nominate Dave Hudson.
Well, that's good. Let's close the nominations. Does you hear anybody else? Any objection? Seeing none, we'll move to vice chair.
I nominate Janet Abelson.
We'll close the nominations because I don't have anybody. Any objections? Seeing none, congratulations to both of us. We get it for next year. Consent calendar items are generally routine in nature.
Move adoption of the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, this time it's Abelson 1, Romick 2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No opposition. We are on to regular item 6.0. Brad Beck, you get to start us off.
Yes, thank you very much. Tonight we would like to present to you the countywide Safe Routes to School Needs Assessment. It's the result of the first report out of the Phase 2 of the Safe Routes to School Needs Assessment project. And we have a PowerPoint for you this evening. Julie Morgan from Ferrum Piers is the principal project manager for the project, and she will present the Safe Routes to School Needs Assessment to you, and we hope at the end of that you will approve the release of the needs assessment to the RTBCs and the general public for their review and comment.
Thank you, Julie. Before you get started, I forgot to tell everybody this is item 6.0, review and approval to release the draft countywide state Safe Routes to School Needs Assessment. So if anybody wants to fill out a speaker card, please give it to Diane to your right. Go ahead. You got it.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here and have a chance to talk with you about the work that we've been doing on the Safe Routes to School Needs Assessment. There has been and continues to be a lot of really great work done in Contra Costa on the topic of Safe Routes to School, encouraging students to walk and bicycle to school and improving safety around school locations. But I think the authority has known for quite some time that the need for those types of projects and programs certainly outstrips the resources that have been available, at least thus far. And so the authority wanted to try to get their hands around what would the level of funding need to be in order to really, truly comprehensively address the needs for safe routes to school in this county. So that's been the purpose of our effort here over the last number of months. And I'd like to just take a few minutes and walk you through this needs assessment that we've put together. So the purpose of our study has been to, first of all, understand the current efforts that have been going on in the county, of which there are many in a variety of regions, then to engage with those who are providing Safe Routes to School programs and the stakeholders. We've engaged an oversight committee that we've met with a number of times over the course of this effort, and then we've put together this estimate of the funding needed to comprehensively address Safe Routes to School. Our basic approach has been one in which, again, we're trying to understand the current costs and the expenditures that have been made to date, both for capital projects and for programs. We're going to try to extrapolate those costs then on a countywide basis, and we've been working a lot with the Oversight Committee, which is made up of the current program providers and staff representatives from jurisdictions throughout the county who are interested in this topic. And we've met with them about a half a dozen times over the last year or so as they've been reviewing our methods, providing a lot of excellent information on what is currently being done and sort of checking the reasonableness of the assumptions that we've been making. I would put a forward a few caveats and just remind you of some of the limitations of a study of this nature. First of all, we have been focusing exclusively on public schools. There are 217 public schools throughout the county. They enroll about 160,000 students. So our focus has been on that. And we recognize that there are private schools, naturally, a number of them throughout the county, but those were just outside of the scope of this particular effort. We have based our information on, to the greatest extent, on what's been available from the program providers and from the jurisdictions throughout the county and from the authority's own database. But obviously, there is a limit to that, and so our cost estimates are based on a relatively small sample size. So that's just one of the limitations we should be cognizant of as we're looking at this information. And we had a limited amount of time and resources in which to do the study. So naturally, in order to look at something as big and as diverse as Contra Costa County, we did have to make a number of assumptions and simplifications. We simply didn't have time to go out and individually contact every single school location to get some direct input from them. So let's talk about the needs assessment. We really broke it into two categories. The first one being capital improvement projects, so physical changes to the infrastructure around the school location in order to improve safety and access for pedestrians and cyclists. We started by assembling a list. We had about 50 or so recently completed Safe Routes to School capital projects that have occurred all around the county, and we were able to get costs, actual costs, for those projects that have been completed in the past 8 to 10 years. We then categorized those by type of project. Some of them were very basic, pretty low cost and quick to implement, signage, striping, bicycle racks, that sort of thing, all the way up to more streetscape improvements where they might add crosswalks or signals, and even up to some major roadway widenings in order to provide sidewalks in some locations where those had been missing. So we categorize them by project type because obviously there are different costs associated with those different types of projects. So we calculated that average cost by type, and then we extrapolated that outward to determine the proportion of schools that would need those types of projects. I will note that we also did account for, we know that there are some schools that need somewhat unusual projects, very high cost items, could be like a pedestrian bridge over a major roadway or over a canal. Those are unusual, but there are certain schools that do need access improvements like that. So we did also calculate an average cost for those and wrapped those into the calculation as well. But we applied them, we assumed that it was just a very small percentage of schools that would need that type of improvement. So when we look at our countywide extrapolation of all of these numbers, we come to a total of a little over $240 million. So that's made up of a combination of these typical improvements as well as these unusual or major improvements at a small proportion of schools. The second main category of needs that we looked at then were programs. So these are educational encouragement programs where they actually go out and work with the students directly at the school to give them training on how to travel safely by bicycle and to encourage them to walk or to cycle to school. So once again, we took a fairly similar approach. We started by trying to understand what kinds of programs are currently in place, and there are 3 program providers in Contra Costa that provide great programs to a number of schools. We got a lot of good information from them about the nature of those programs and the cost of them, and then we extrapolated those out to a countywide level. So I want to speak specifically about, just to give you a little bit more context for these numbers. The first line there is assuming what if we were to expand the current set of programs that are currently offered to a subset of schools in the county, what if we were to expand those programs countywide? And our calculation on that is that that would cost about $3.9 million a year. So that's continuing what's already happening, but just expanding it to all schools. Then there are a number of additional safety and educational programs that the program providers identified for us that they would like to be able to provide if resources were available. So it would sort of augment what they're already providing. If those got added in, that would be another $5.2 million a year to provide those programs. One of the largest elements of that would be a comprehensive crossing guard program. Right now, some schools have crossing guards, but others do not. And if those were to be offered at all schools countywide, that would be a major portion of that $5.2 million cost. And then finally, there are a couple of real transportation programs that are provided in certain parts of the county. And we also calculated what that would cost if those were to be expanded countywide. And those two are the subsidized transit pass program, which 511 Contra Costa sponsors in some places, and then also the school bus program. Right now, the La Miranda area and part of San Ramon Valley have yellow school bus programs, and so we looked at their information about how much those programs cost and extrapolated that out if those were provided countywide. As you can see, that's a big number. That's a $48.5 million number. Most of that is for the school bus program. Yeah.
The subsidized transit pass, we have one in at WICTAC. You said it was sponsored by 511 Contra Costa.
Some of them are, that's right, but there are others in
But
other
others-
parts of the county.
The one, Major J sponsors one.
That's right, yeah. So this, again, would be if that were extrapolated out and expanded so that it would apply countywide as well.
Nope, that was it. I just wanted to.
Keep going. It's Julie, right?
Yes.
What a
yeah.
memory. Go ahead. Keep going.
So if you take all of those together, then you see the total there of over $57 million as an annual cost for all of those programs. So an expansion or an extension of the current programs to apply countywide, some augmentation of those programs, and the transit pass and school bus program, if those were to be extrapolated countywide. Again, I want to caution or provide a caveat, as I did at the beginning. These are rough numbers that are based just on a fairly small sample size of what's already being offered in the county. Clearly, if these programs were to actually be implemented, there would be a lot of variability, there would be a lot of discussion that might need to go on about, for example, what the level of subsidy would be, how much parents might be asked to contribute, for example. So, but these are rough numbers to sort of give you an order of magnitude. So that is both the capital projects and the program elements then of the countywide needs assessment. As Brad said, what we'd like to do now is to circulate this draft report around to the RTPCs and be able to get their review and comment on it, with the idea that potentially these results could be incorporated into the financially constrained project list. So,
Any questions of Julie or Brad? Seeing none, anyone in the audience wishing to speak to this? Seeing none, then what you're looking for is, you took it off, a motion to circulate the draft needs assessment to the regional planning committees, the RTPCs. Do I hear a motion to that effect?
Second?
You've got to be quick up here. We have a motion, Romick, second, Abelson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hearing no opposition, we're on to number 7. This one's yours, Martin. Approval to retain contract planning managers to oversee, and you can explain the rest, right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As you know, MTC has been delegating a lot of work to the congestion management agencies, and with the passage of Resolution 4035, they are carrying out Senate Bill 375, which includes doing a lot of work to help develop our priority development areas. And one of the things MTC offered us was $2.7 million in priority development area, that's PDA planning grants, and gave us some choices of how we could handle the money. And what we thought would be the best thing to do for our local jurisdictions so that they would have the most expeditious access to the funds and the least amount of rules and regulations and paperwork was to have MTC give us the full $2.7 million, and then we, the authority, are going to go out and get the federal approvals, the E76, and all the things that are necessary. These are things that Brad is working on right now with Caltrans District 4. We have to get an E76 for this $2.7 million, and once we have that, we would go out with a call for projects to the local jurisdictions and ask them, what would you like to study in your PDAs? And we have developed criteria for that, which the Technical Coordinating Committee visited last month. There's a schedule that we handed out, which kind of shows you how we get to having $2.7 million in planning grants by September. And once those grants are cut loose, we could expect to have anywhere from 10 to 20 studies going on in 20 different jurisdictions. And the planning staff would be overstretched if we had to attend every one of those meetings, and that is something MTC has asked us to do, that we attend all of the PDA TAC meetings in each local jurisdiction, that we monitor the progress of the consultant, and that we work very closely with the cities on these PDA planning grants. So just from a human resources management standpoint, we would really have a tough time, the three of us here, covering that. So what we'd like to do is engage some planning managers who can oversee these studies and attend these meetings and manage the consultants, including some of the contract negotiations and the invoicing. So the planning manager would be a part-time person or persons who would act as an extension of authority staff. So we went out with an RFQ, and we got 5 proposals, and we actually had a very strong competition. There were 5 very qualified planners that proposed. We were kind of looking for sole proprietors or small limited liability companies, so that they would not have a conflict with the big consulting firms that are going to be doing the $2.7 million, since they'll be managing that work. So we actually had 2 gold medalists here. One is Paul Kripke with Kripke Consulting, and the other is Paul Fassinger with CTP. And I'd ask both of them now to stand up, and if you come up to the table there and have a seat. The 2 Pauls, and they are seasoned engineers and planners. Actually, Paul Kripke to the left there is I think more of an engineer than a planner, but a very good project manager and a seasoned consultant manager. And Paul Fassinger to the right was the director of research at ABAG for a long time, and he has a PhD, and so he knows a lot about the whole, all the way from focus to PDAs to Plan Bay Area. He knows the whole story. So we're talking about bringing the 2 of them on. It would be we would hire them to create one full person year over the next 3 years to oversee these projects, and we think that will help us resource-wise in covering this important effort. The contract conditions are in your packet, and the total contract value is $110,000 for each firm, and we're asking tonight for your approval of their contracts.
Questions of Martin? We have any cards, Diane? Anybody rushing? Okay, no one wants to speak. I see no questions. Do I have a motion? They're asking for authorization to. You can read it.
I move that we authorize the chair to execute the 2 agreements, one with each of the 2 firms that were selected.
Cool. Here's your big chance.
I'll second.
The dynamic duo at it again. Just reverse it. Abelson 1, Romer 2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hearing no opposition. Congratulations, gentlemen. Item 8.0, my favorite of the night. Comments on Senate Bill 743, Steinberg, and the NBA. Who's the lucky one? Matt Kelly, go for it.
That would be me. Thank you, Chair Hudson. The California State Senate passed Senate Bill 743 and was signed by the governor last September. There's a lot of information regarding SB 743 in your packet, including the actual bill language, but I'll try and summarize the main points for you. The bill makes several changes to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and affects projects located in areas well served by transit, commonly known as transit-oriented developments, such as the one we're currently sitting in. The major change affecting our local jurisdictions and the authority is the removal of level of service, or LOS, along with other vehicle delay-based measures as findings of significance under CEQA. The bill also allows for this same removal of delay-based metrics in areas outside of transit-oriented developments. Currently, the level of service analysis under CEQA focuses on the amount of delay that vehicles face or vehicles experience at intersections and on roadway segments. The bill directs the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, or OPR, to develop alternative criteria for measuring the transportation impacts in the CEQA analysis. Specifically, within transit-oriented developments, the new criteria must, quote, promote the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, the development of multimodal transportation networks, and a diversity of land uses, unquote. The bill suggests alternative measures, including VMT, vehicle miles traveled, VMT per capita, auto trip generation rates, and automobile trips generated, among others. OPR staff has until July 1st to issue its draft guidelines for the new methods of analysis, which today are still undefined. Authority staff wishes to submit a comment letter to OPR, and we developed a short survey for our local planning directors and traffic engineers to complete in order to help us shape our comments. The survey and its responses can be found in attachment E in your packet. The survey was sent out to all the planning directors and engineers in the county, and we used the responses to generate discussion of SB 743 at last month's TCC meeting. Responses from local staff showed that 90% are currently using level of service in their CEQA analysis today, and only 18% of respondents would support its elimination. The primary concerns that emerged during the TCC discussion included the ability to continue using LOS in areas that are not served by transit outside of TODs, and the loss of one of the tools that may be used to evaluate transportation impacts. Also, a concern was the alternative criteria that is yet to be developed and what tools and guidance will be available to local staff to do the analysis. Would it be using the regional travel demand models or something else? They were concerned about the ability to secure transportation mitigations resulting from impacts to the transportation system under the new criteria. They were concerned about the effect on transit travel times, specifically for buses in TOD areas where they may be caught in the congestion. And there was concern for the effect on the authority's congestion management program and the growth management program, where level of service is currently used as one of the standards. For example, State Route 4's multimodal transportation service objective in the action plans uses a delay index of 2.0 as its standard. So if a general plan amendment came along that may have led to a delay index of 2.5, how would that be mitigated under the new criteria? So staff has incorporated these concerns into the letter found in attachment B in your packet, and we wish to point out that staff does support the elimination of LOS in transit-served areas, but that outside of these areas it should remain an option in addition to the new criteria. Just this morning I sat in a meeting with CMA staff from around the region, along with 3 staff members from OPR. And the OPR staff were very appreciative to hear the variety of concerns from around the region, many of which mirrored our own concerns, especially regarding the undefined new measures. And OPR has committed to consult with the CMA staff, specifically here in the Bay Area, as they develop the alternative criteria between now and July. So staff's recommendation tonight is to transmit the attached comment letter to OPR, and that completes my report. I'd be glad to take any questions or comments.
Janet, you have a question?
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering about the yet to be developed replacement system for LOS and what it might look like. So I don't know whether to be worried or happy or just not thinking about it at all. That's probably what I guess I'll do. But I'm just trying to think of things that would be helpful, because to me, thinking about it, because in my city is kind of that example, because we have we have high-level transit throughout our entire corridor. We have we have transit vehicles that run with a frequency that's greater than every 15 minutes in all segments of that. And what I guess I would be primarily concerned about is that the transit vehicles can move. What LOS did to us is make it difficult to create our transit centers because they would bear the impact of that already failing LOS. So is there a way in this letter to sort of suggest that something to that effect?
I mean, we can address that in the letter. Right now, the concern has been from transit agencies that their buses may be caught in the congestion, and that's not being analyzed as part of CEQA with the removal of LOS. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You have trouble developing the transit centers because of LOS, and then without LOS, you have trouble getting the transit vehicles through.
I'm not suggesting that LOS should remain. I wanted it to go, but I just want to make sure that whatever replacement system that comes in doesn't make it difficult for transit vehicles.
And that was expressed this morning by AC Transit and other transit agencies, VTA. So the OPR has heard those comments.
Okay, thank you.
Martin, you had something to add?
I would just say that this letter, the primary focus of this letter is to ask OPR to allow us to continue to use level of service outside of transit priority areas. And it's not really a comment on the alternative method. We don't know what that is yet. And I talked to the Building Industry Association last Friday about another topic, but I asked them how many had heard of SB 743, and none of them had. And I asked them how many would like to get rid of level of service, and they said that would be great, because level of service is a real pain in the neck for us, because we can't, our projects get hung up on it, and we have to mitigate, and so that'd be great. And I said, well, do you know what the replacement is? And they said, no. And would you rather go with what you know or what you don't know? And so what we don't know is what that replacement methodology is going to be, and it's going to be something about vehicle miles traveled, greenhouse gas emissions, vehicle hours traveled, length of trip. Any kind of vehicle trip generation will probably have some kind of a trigger for a threshold of significance. But in Contra Costa County, we have areas that are really not well served by transit. San Francisco is quite different. San Francisco has no problem with this because all of San Francisco is a TPA. Similarly, Oakland has no problem with this. San Jose is okay with this because they're a TPA. So, but in Contra Costa, we spent the past, I guess we're kind of wedded to this in that we spent the past 15 years setting performance measures that can serve as thresholds of significance in CEQA. And so, for example, on Highway 4, a delay index of 2.0, that's delay-based methodology. We say it shouldn't take you more than twice as long to drive on Highway 4 during rush hour than it does during the off-peak. That's a delay index of 2.0. We wouldn't be allowed to use that in CEQA any longer under this, under OPR's guidelines. The legislation allows us to do that, but OPR is setting guidelines that would prohibit that. So that's why we're saying we'd like to keep LOS and delay outside of TPAs, and we're fine with getting rid of it within TPAs.
Dave, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm sorry? No. Oh, okay. A couple of a few questions. The first one is, on page 2, it says that comments are due February 14. Did we get an extension, or is that a typo, or?
The comments on February 14th were for the new methodology.
Okay,
And
which doesn't exist yet, so.
Which doesn't exist yet.
Okay.
They're just for suggestions and comments on that. So we're past that, but they are still, I mean,
They're still taking
they're
comments.
taking comments. This
Okay.
doesn't happen until July, I don't think.
No, I got that part. Okay, on page 8-6, and I'm on the letter itself now. How do I say this? As you probably recall, I am not a fan of LOS. And I think there are statements in the letter here that go far further than I am comfortable with. And so I guess my comment here that'll go to the questions I'm going to ask is I don't think that it's useful or helpful to replace absolutes with corresponding opposite absolutes. So the issue that I believe we have with SB 743 is it prohibits the use of TOS. And I get that there are, I'm sorry, of LOS, that I get that there are circumstances and places where using LOS is or might be appropriate. I don't think the corollary to you can't use it at all is that it's fantastic and we must. So there are a couple of places in here where that theme is going to go through what I'm going to suggest. The first is on this page 8-6. I do think it's important that LOS remains an appropriate tool that may be used for assessing how a transportation system operates, as opposed to suggesting that it's the only tool or the primary tool. In the next paragraph, the middle section says, we believe that LOS and delay measures are important tools for analyzing how the transportation system functions. I think, again, it can be or may be. So I think in some instances it's useless. It's just my own personal opinion. The next paragraph down at the end where we say, and should be kept in the tool bag, I would say in the tool bag for use where appropriate. And as long as we are comfortable that this isn't saying that we believe that LOS standards must be used as the only measurement, then I'm okay. What I fear is that we lock ourselves into language that A, I don't particularly like, don't think a whole lot of other people like, and B, may hinder our ability in the future as standards change statewide to appeal for monies and things like that if we're locked into a standard that other folks ultimately issue.
A couple points. Let me work backwards because you were on it. Page 8-21. I guess it would be 5C. 1 goes right to the point that you just heard from former Chair Durant. The Office of Planning and Research may adopt guidelines pursuant to Section 21083. I have no idea what that is. Maybe we need a little blurb on what 083 is. Establishing alternative metrics to the metric used for traffic levels of service, blah, blah, blah. The alternative metric may include the retention of traffic levels of service. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, as long as we're staying with the may. Interesting, you brought up BIA, and they said, we hate levels of service. Did you tell them that outside the PDAs, they would still be levels of service? Or did they address that at all, Martin?
Well,
They just don't want them anywhere.
the direction OPR is going, and this is a very clear direction we've heard from the OPR staff, is you will never see level of service or delay index used again in any EIR throughout California. That's the direction they're going.
Yeah.
As we read the legislation, it says that's true for transportation priority areas, but the legislation is very permissive as to outside of them.
Yeah, that's what I just read.
Yeah,
It's straight up
and so the Building Industry Association, the people that were in the room anyway, if you could eliminate level of service, they would appreciate it in that it would be one less thing they have to worry about as far as an environmental impact, but they might not appreciate the new metric.
The two things, and then I'll go back to that and see if I can remember it. One is, talks about 100 specific plans. Is there a list or whatever? I don't want to kill 2 plans or not be on the, I'd kind of like to know that they're not talking about me and I don't know it. If there's a list anywhere, somewhere in our changes to CEQA document, it said 100 specific plans. And the other thing is your recommendation for us to approve this or us to send it to CCTA full board to approve it? Okay. Outside of that, I didn't have anything more to it, unless somebody has some other comments. Should we pass it on to the big boys
And girls.
and girls? Well, they're bigger than the boys, so okay. Are we going to jump out here and see who's first? You're going to try to break the string?
Looking for a motion?
Yeah.
Second.
You're out, Kevin. Lady Supervisor 1, Councilwoman 2. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Seeing none. Thank
And
you.
let me-
What
is
you
there-
want?
Is the motion to approve with the language that I was suggesting? Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we always do with David.
Thank you.
But it goes to the full CCTA board, and then Don will straighten Dave out. If he's here. Okay, we're good so far, everything's fine. Who's got the next one? I think we're on to 9. We'll call this the federal project. Okay, informational presentation on North, well, it's a very compelling letter that Federal wrote, that's why we call it the Federal. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Federal Glover, yeah. No, this is Federal, in here's a letter from Federal. So who's doing this? We have Martin, you got this one too.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
So for this presentation, I'll ask that Rich Seithel and Gary Kraft come up to the table. They are, Rich Seithel is with Contra Costa County, and he has been working on this project for some time. And he is the Chief of Annexations and Economic Stimulus Programs at Contra Costa County. And Gary Kraft is a consultant who specializes in economics. I've always thought of him as a brilliant economist, but you're not supposed to use the word brilliant. But I have a great deal of respect for Mr. Kraft and the work he's done. So they developed this study along with, I think, was it Cambridge Systematics?
The tree.
Worked on this, and they had some money from a housing mitigation fund that is actually mentioned in the previous item for a level of service mitigation, and so they gotten started on a study to look at revitalizing the northern waterfront of Contra Costa. And that's an area that's seen many changes over the past century. But there's so many opportunities up there, and it could become a real economic engine for the county. And we also see a lot of priority development areas on the northern waterfront along the cities all the way from Hercules to Antioch, and we want to be able to link those together and have access between the PDAs into the PDAs. But as you know, movement of freight is very important to commerce and industry, and movement of freight is not always compatible with livable communities. There are a lot of land use conflicts on the northern waterfront as well, with noise and air quality. And so looking at all that together is a very challenging study that's been started by the county, and we appreciate that. The study that the county completed has in it an action item to figure out what kind of infrastructure projects are needed to improve freight movement on the northern waterfront. And so working in partnership with the county authority staff, put together a grant proposal for Caltrans community-based transportation grant funding. And so we have a $300,000 grant that we submitted, and we want to let you know that we've done that, and ask that you keep your fingers crossed that we get the funding. And then we also have this $2.7 million in planning kind of ties into this, in that we could use the public outreach portion of the $2.7 million to help bring this information out to the cities, because one of the issues with the county study is it was done fairly quickly, and they did not have an opportunity to do a real public outreach effort, and also to tie in the TODs along the way. So I'm going to ask, this is an informational item, but I'm going to ask Rich and Gary if they want to talk briefly about the current status of this, because I know there are things happening. And then if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. So I'll turn the floor over to Rich.
Okay, before we do, Rich or Gary, is there anybody else from your consulting team or this working group or ad hoc committee here tonight that could recognize?
Mark mentioned Cambridge Systematics was a part of the team.
Okay. Okay, then we're going to hear from Rich, right? Not you? Good. Go for it. You got it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Martin, I wish you wouldn't have called Gary brilliant, because I think his hourly rate just went up. No, it didn't. It couldn't possibly, right? Martin did ask us, and first we'd like to thank Randy, Ross, Martin, and Lindsay. The public forum that was held January 10th was barely over before they proactively reached out to us and wanted to have a meeting and talk more about this initiative, because they saw immediately the regional collaboration that was available. So much applause to the Transportation Authority staff. We appreciate that from the county. Give you a little breakdown on the northern waterfront and why we feel it's so important. And Martin asked us to keep this kind of short. Statistically, it's about a 50 to 55 mile stretch along the northern waterfront from the city of Hercules to the city of Oakley. It's about a mile wide and encompasses about 28,000 acres, or about 47 square miles. Interestingly, in the context of Contra Costa County, it contains about 61% of all the industrial zone parcels. Within the northern waterfront itself, 26% of the northern waterfront is designated industrial. As a balancing point, 35% is protected land, parks, and open space. So we see a balance there, and we are interested in quality of life issues as well. We strongly feel that it is a candidate for an economic development initiative, and why we feel that it's a great partnership with the Transportation Authority is because of the existing assets out on the northern waterfront. We've got 2 Class 1 railroads. We have deep water shipping channels, 35 feet deep. The Highway 4 widening project that I appreciate every day when I go from Antioch to Martinez and home. The potential Tri-Link, which we think is extremely important, and I know that Randy and Martin are working very hard on that project. You're also involved, I know, with the Weta Ferry Service, which is also a part of the northern waterfront, from Hercules, Martinez, and the city of Antioch. And the whole thing is goods movement, freight movement, as Martin mentioned earlier. And it's extremely important to the northern waterfront. Where we're at in the process right now, the next steps that we've engaged in since the forum, we've been working with the cities, the 6 cities, and hopefully all 6 cities in the county will be passing a resolution that's going to look at the protection of industrial zone land, the continuing of the work group that's been working on the northern waterfront, and to really devote time and energy to this effort. We also have been reaching out for public-private coalitions in a consortium so that we can work with private industry, other public agencies, and the public. We really want to develop a regional brand identity of the northern waterfront. So, because we feel that's very important when we reach out for grants and other funding. It seems like that's a very important issue, and it is in the study, that the grant that Martin's applied for. Finally, we want to adopt a regional action plan and implementation program, and we look to do that before the end of the year. Part of that's going to be, we're forming action teams that we've asked people to volunteer for, and we have had people from businesses and the public. We're actually having our first meeting next week for land use, and that's going to be headed by the East Bay Leadership Council, who is very interested in working with us as well. So that's kind of a brief explanation of what's going on. Gary Kraft in Kraft Consulting in Cambridge did the report. Gary's here to answer any questions. We're here to answer any questions. I'd like to point out, Gary handed out a one-page that gives you a little breakdown of the facts of the northern waterfront. One of the items we passed out at the forum was an atlas. They're gone. Or we would have given everybody here another atlas. We're going to try to order some more, but we have them online now just recently. And on this sheet, underneath the contact information, is my email address, my telephone number, and the website where you can go to see a copy of the report that Gary handed out, the atlas, some of the presentations we've been making pre-forum and post-forum, and other information. There's actually a Google Earth tour there of the northern waterfront. So again, thank Transportation Authority staff for all the work they've put in, and it was a tremendous effort in a quick turnaround, and it was astounding. And we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Rich or Gary or Martin? I had one, and only because I didn't see him in here, and they get in on everything. Is there any contact at this point with East Bay Regional Park District? Because you mentioned a large percentage of this.
Yes, sir. Actually, they participated in one of the panel discussions that we had at the forum.
But they don't have anybody on the. They don't have anyone on the working group. That's
The working group consists basically of the county and the 6 cities.
okay.
And then we have other groups that move from there, and they are part of the action teams.
Okay.
So yes, sir. They're
Thank you. This is informational only. If we'd have any other, go ahead, Martin.
Well, it's informational. The question for the planning committee is, would you like to have a larger presentation? You just got a sampling of it tonight, but a presentation at the full authority meeting to have this as a major discussion item somewhere down the road. We have a lot of things going on in April and May, but we could schedule it maybe for June or July.
I think our fellow colleague Supervisor Glover would appreciate that at the appropriate time.
Great.
Well, I think the great and powerful chair just said yes, so we better have one there, working with him on the agenda. That was what you heard in the background. But, I mean, that's up to you guys when you're setting the agenda. I have no idea how long it's going to be. That's the concern I have before you set it up. But I think the consensus here, I'm looking around, is, yeah, we'd all like to hear it. I would ask specifically, because he's talked about it quite a bit, that Ron Leone be notified of this. I mean, he sometimes shows up as an alternate, but he had expressed a lot of concern about this. Go ahead, Karen.
And I've talked to Councilmember Leone, and he's very aware of it, and I have provided him with the documents. He was not able to attend the recent workshop. My staff was there. I know other staff was there. So, yeah, I mean, ditto, but he knows about it. Ron's interest is the waterfront for the city of Concord, but I've confirmed, I mean, the Navy isn't going to give up that deep water port, so go for it, city of Concord, but I personally don't think the city will be as involved, other than from a transportation perspective as it relates to Highway 4. I've been around way too long. I don't see the Navy reopening Port Chicago Highway. They gave us money to close it, and it took forever to get it. So you all are very familiar with that. I think we all need to be involved, but I'm just...
They don't know who they're messing with, Karen. Get them.
No, I'm just being a realist here. I want to see this move forward. I know
Come down to San
federal...
Ramon.
I mean, we need to do whatever we can on economic development and how that can move forward. But a lot of that property that is not available is not going to become available. It's the bottom line.
Okay, we've been so informed. Thank you, gentlemen. Look forward to seeing you at the full big meeting in the big house that night. And
I did have one question.
go ahead.
I was just wondering about Richmond and why it's the northern waterfront and why it doesn't include Richmond.
I think because that's Supervisor Joya and this is Supervisor Glover's initiative. And it wasn't that they weren't doing that, but they've got a lot of other things already going on. So it was just,
So they
more
don't
or
have an
less-
interest?
Well, it isn't, we all have an interest because it affects all of us. But this was Supervisor Glover's project when he was, became chair last year. And so he's been working on it, and it really goes, it's a bridge-to-bridge thing. Well, it's a little bit farther than the bridge, but anyway, it's Federal's district.
And Point Pinole pretty much separates them, if the East Bay, what,
Because then you have other initiatives that get around. This was strictly Contra Costa County.
cool, thank you.
That's, I mean,
And Richmond's in Contra Costa.
yeah. Richmond isn't Contra Costa.
No, I know that.
I just want to, I mean, I don't live in, that's not my specific area, other than it is the WICTAC area. But, so it's like taking part of it, but not all of it. It's a little odd, but.
He came to us as the board and asked for us to put a blessing on moving forward on this, and we did, and the parameters were set.
Okay.
I have a feeling that Richmond pretty much wants to take care of their own, at least when I
I'm
talked
not
to-
really sure one way or the
on
other. I just
BCDC
thought I would
stuff.
ask the question.
No, it's a good question. And we'll, specifically, I'm going to ask him. But we're going to move on to item 10, the last big ticket item of the night. And you got that one, Martin?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I have to apologize. The summary of issues here looks a little bit like you were going to hear a presentation tonight from EMC, but it's actually written for the authority agenda. That's what I thought. And so at the last authority meeting, we presented the polling results that are in your packet, and we were directed by the authority to drill a little deeper and try to find out a little bit more about the public's feelings about transportation, and so we're gathering some more information. EMC is doing a second poll, and the results of that will be brought to the ad hoc committee on the 17th and to the full authority on the 19th, and then at the March 19th meeting, you'll have an opportunity to discuss the countywide transportation plan and the public outreach effort and possible next steps for that effort.
So we're really not doing an action tonight, other than it's still going. You still have a question, Janet? You're like,
No. Oh, I'm sorry.
okay. So we're going to just move forward. We know that the ad hoc committee will look at it, and then there'll be the full meeting, and then something will pop up for the latest polling that's being done by EMC. So there's no action you need tonight on 10, is what I'm saying.
That's correct. It's
Okay.
really a placeholder for the 19th.
And seeing that, we have no other business, no news clippings or correspondence. We're adjourned to the next meeting, April 2nd, 2014. That's a Wednesday. Thank you. That's a wrap.